Hello and welcome to another episode of Off the Rock, your weekly rugby breakdown with me, John Ferguson. Now, you guys are no strangers to the fact that I have regular podcast guests from the Scrumbag Podcast, and today is no different. But we're bringing in Mitch Foster here because our good mate Lockie is actually on to some new things in life. Maybe we can discuss that next time he's on. But right now we've got Mitch. Mitch, thank you so much for coming on, mate.
No worries, John. Thanks for having me on. Always good to talk rugby. So, yeah, happy to be on here.
And we are going to talk about rugby, which makes us all happy. But unfortunately, from an Australian perspective, it's a little bit on the dour side because obviously we are going through the losses of Twickenham, and it really does feel like the Wallabies' momentum for the year has well and truly hit a low. It's definitely not the worst game the Wallabies have played, but in the terms of how the score looks and the way that we were in the game, it definitely felt like the worst game that we've had. So why don't you give us the initial take from your end on what you saw in the game, and then we'll go through
Mm.
briefly the chronological events of the game. I'll whip up some stats, and then we'll wrap up with who we thought the key players were with, and as well as selection. And while we do that, guys, if you like the content, if you feel like you want to debate with us, get down in the comments below, and then also don't forget to like and subscribe because that allows us to bring more rugby content to rugby lovers like you. So, Mitch, let's get straight into it, shall we?
First of all, pretty disappointing performance from the Wallabies from the outset. The scoreline didn't flatter us. The fact that we only scored 7 points in that whole 80-minute period, and that was a very freak intercept opportunity from Harry Potter there. Overall, like I think as a Wallabies fan, I guess I'm sitting in kind of two different thoughts at the moment, two different pools of thought about this game. On the one hand, it's like you got to be realist and look at the team list that we had, the players that we didn't have for selection, and the team that we were going up against England. And I'm sure we'll talk about it in terms of depth and who we had available, and that the cohesion element didn't favour us at all, and things just didn't go our way. But on the other hand, we all of the work that Joe Schmidt and his team has put into this Wallabies team for the last probably 18 months, it almost felt like it came undone at Twickenham. We didn't look like we had any idea what we were doing. We didn't fire a shot. The halve pairing didn't work. We just didn't seem to have any idea what we were doing in the opposition 22. We had opportunities. We were playing in the right areas of the field at times, but we just weren't scoring points. And when you go up against an England team at Twickenham who has a point to prove and has, the Lions series, they had players who, there's talks in the media about them not some of them not necessarily standing up. They came on and they had a point to prove against the Wallabies.
Yeah, and I think that feeling that a lot of the work has been undone during that Joe Schmidt has done under his now a little bit more than it's an almost what would you say, it's a bit over a year tenure, like 18 months, like
Mm.
we're looking at. It's one of those things that you start looking at and being like, okay, so we were building depth, and that's kind of he's said that openly. That's part of his charge as being Wallabies coach. But it's really
Yep.
interesting when you start looking at who was out and who couldn't be selected by injury or whatever. So you've
Hmm.
got James O'Connor, Len Ikitau, Tom Hooper, Will Skelton, more so from our most recent performers. Then you've got Tom Wright as well. So that's five players from a starting 15 we would pick hands down if we could. And then you've got someone like you probably could have played Lucan earlier had it not been for a rib cartilage injury. You probably would have liked to have Tizano on the bench, but he has a little bit of an MCL niggle from the Japan game. Am I missing any other injuries? Well, obviously, sorry. And then the retirement of Nick White and James Slipper. That is almost 10 players from the starting 15 that we've been building through and we've really kind of cemented as like key starters
Yep.
that and as well as take McDermott. So like we're getting into high numbers here. That's almost like an entire starting 15, like backs and forwards. And then also Noah Lolesio. So like, sorry, I just keep thinking of these players, and it just goes to show that like it's not even the 15 tests. Like some of these players got injured in our first test, like Noah Lolesio.
Mm.
Some of them have gone into retirement, and so
Yep.
while there is a look to the future, this is part of the growing pain where we are, where injuries have struck, Reg 9 window hasn't been hit. And so I don't want to make excuses, but I do want to be very clear with people that is far from how good a side we could field, and a
Mm.
lot of it is due from factors that we actually can't control, like injury. Four of them were through selection issues that we either didn't work out beforehand, or we didn't want to spend the cash, or we simply actually couldn't because the competition that those players are playing in actually wouldn't allow the release of those players, and clubs could get fined apparently. So it's
What a
it's
G up.
all
What an
it's
absolute G
all
up
oh,
considering
absolute G up.
who
Yeah,
who was
seriously.
available for selection. The other person I'll just quickly jump in there, John, is that we haven't spoken about, James O'Connor. And again, he falls into that whole selection criteria of a player not available through the fact that he signed with an English Premier team now. But the absence of him in this squad is confusing. And Tane Edmed didn't have a great game. He didn't have a great game last week, and
Yep.
this is what his third or fourth game running for Joe Schmidt and the Wallabies that he just hasn't really fired a shot. And so when we
Mm,
start to look at the makeup of this squad that Joe Schmidt has picked for this spring tour, we've got Ben Donaldson sitting back in Australia, not doing anything at the moment, having
yep.
time off. He should be included. He should be the guy that we're looking to now. We've had Tane given him options. It hasn't worked. We now need to bring Ben Donaldson in. I don't know if that's the option. I would imagine that James O'Connor does come into the Wallabies setup at some point, but we haven't officially heard that either out of Wallabies channels.
Yeah, and I think what we've heard previously about Ben Donaldson is that he doesn't trust his skill set nor command the team as Joe Schmidt wants him to. He definitely has the running game and the long boot on him, but I think that's where Joe Schmidt has kind of, from previous comments and kind of how we've talked about players being left in and taken out.
Mm,
That's still the feeling that I think Joe Schmidt has had towards Ben Donaldson here, and then whereas I think Tane's now played what, maybe 5, 6 tests all up, whether it's on
mm,
the bench, whether it's at 10, or it's I think now you've probably got a pretty sound collection of how someone plays and how someone trains throughout the week. So it'd be
mm.
interesting to see how this selection for Italy goes, which we'll get into in a second. But why don't we just go through the
Yep.
game chronologically, and I'll just whip it up next to me here so you guys can see the kind of flow of it. And it is very much back heavy. And although we weren't shooting the lights out in the first half, there's tries to Pollock in the 58th minute, Mitchell in the 71st, Cowan Dickey in the 74th, and then Pollock gets that yellow card very late in the game, kind of almost near full time, actually. It's just one of
Mm,
those things where the bomb squad for England were exceptionally good, and our bench just couldn't match it due to cohesion. You had Luke Cowan Dickey, who's been shooting the lights out in Prem Rugby. Ellis Gange and Will Stewart probably are the starting props for England based on experience and form, and particularly having been Lions. And then you've got Henry Pollock, who is an elite player, but who's also a Lion, as well as Tom Curry, who was really the man of the match for that first game against the Wallabies. England just had the depth, they had the game plan, and it's a big credit to Steve Borthwick there for trusting his game plan because he lacked genuine ball carriers, as I mentioned in the pre-game preview with Sam Lana, which I recommend you guys go back and watch because we kind of take a broader look at the entire tour. But England just they executed better. I really liked what Ford and Mitchell did, although not from an excitement perspective, but an accuracy and a clinical perspective. They got the team into the right parts of the field. Wallabies did okay under the high ball, but still struggled at times to be able to clean up the scraps and being urgent. I just think that that map purely reflects at the depth, and the depth was an issue because when we came on in the second half and we started bringing our players on, Daniel Tupo went off at the 45th minute, Angus Bell went off at the 51st minute or something like that. It wasn't enough minutes for those guys to get through, particularly when you're not bringing on guys who are absolutely firing in the likes of Alan Altoa still recovering from that pec/shoulder injury. Tom Robinson is
yep.
yet to be an impact player at test level. And then you've got Nick Champion de Crepney, who played very well against Japan, but he's not exactly a starter. If you've got the likes of Hooper and Valentini there, and then also you've got Lucan, who's dealing with the rib cartilage injury, so he probably was he's not at his best at the moment. With obviously Darcy Swain just having to come into the fray. I The attack is the glaring issue, Mitch, and here's the question I'm going to ask you:
Mhm.
do you think that all the critique against Tane Edmed, because that is the biggest noise out there on the internet, is fair and warranted, and we need to see change, regardless of who it is? We need to see change against Italy.
Yeah, I think we do. I think it's at a period now where Tane's had a few shots in the 10 jersey, the starting 10 jersey for the Wallabies. And outside of that Japan game, we've lost all of the games that he started. And it's not, it's probably pretty harsh to sort of put the blame squarely on his shoulders. But number 10 or fly half is such a pivotal position. It's your quarterback. He's the guy that you want to be playing off, the guy that you want to be doing things 110%, the guy that needs to be firing at every single second of the game. And Tane Edmed still has that. He's still good for about three or four simple mistakes in a game. We saw it a few times this week where like there'd be an offload he'd throw that wasn't quite on, or there'd be an offload and he'd be the one receiving it and he knocks it on. Like there were just times where the Wallabies actually started to get it into their attack shape, and that Tane Edmed for some reason would be just the one that would leak a mistake and release that pressure. And
Mm.
that's just not what we need at the moment. Like with a team that's still struggling for getting into their rhythm and to build pressure and to have more than, 5 or 6 phases of attack in one attacking phase, we don't need to be giving up simple possession. And Tane Edmond at the moment is the guy that too many times is making those mistakes.
Yeah, well, I mean, my opinion is, and it has been consistently, is that this Wallaby side needs the fly half to have a 7 out of 10, maybe an 8 out, 7 out of 10, probably, yeah, 7 out of 10 to be able to get these Wallabies to a point where they are competing, where it's a
Mm,
fair game. And I think that the way that you've just highlighted basic errors or uh, I think also like a limitation in imagination about where you can take a side, because I think that
yep.
a lot of what he tried was actually a lot of the thing, like the balls over the top when the rush was coming in hard. So we saw James O'Connor do that against the Springboks to great
Yep.
effect. And it's one of those things where I think that it is really a matter of that 10% about being accurate, but that also comes on wingers being back far enough to be able to run onto the ball. I did feel like some of the wingers were very flat when they got some of those
Hmm.
balls there. That maybe it's because Tane Edmond was wrapping too deep and the backs are standing exactly where they need to. I'd have to go back and take that on notice, and maybe I can do an analysis video on that in the future. But it just felt like everyone was kind of half a step wrong, or like not
Hmm.
where they needed to be in the attack, and that really stifled us. But also in the 22, I just felt like there was never an opportunity like we saw last year at Twickenham where Stualii jinks and pops a little ball over to Tom Wright. There wasn't a moment where we could expose this space. And I think
Yep.
for someone like Suoliti and Jorgensen, who are her two biggest weapons, and I mentioned this on X when I was watching the game at 3 a.m. or whatever, they weren't getting the ball. And I know that is a lot of people believe that is comes down to the 10, but I also think that you never see Lester Fainga'anuku on a wing stay there. You never seen
Mm.
Cheslin Colby just stay on the wing, and you never see Will Jordan for sure stay on a wing. I just think that, I just think that in this instance, after 40 minutes, you need to start getting yourself involved one way or another. And I
Yep.
just think that both those players are now important enough to really go looking for that work. And the Wallabies needed them to go looking for that work.
Yeah, definitely. And I think another point just on Tane Edmed and the comparison with James O'Connor, like we're talking as Wallabies fans about that great win in Johannesburg earlier in the season, and it's 62 years. We played really well. What was so impressive from a performance perspective for James O'Connor is he had a game plan coming into that game which wasn't working. And he had the ability to sort of realize that there was space out wide, that he needed to throw the long ball, that it wasn't the chip over the top wasn't working, the kicking game was not effectual in that, and he shifted perspective, and that's in the second half was when the space opened up. That's when he started to play quickly and widely. We haven't
Mm.
seen a 10 do that since. Like no discredit to Tane Edmund. It's just it's a development period. He's still young. He's only had 5 games as a Wallabies playmaker. He doesn't have the confidence to be able to read a game and say, actually, this isn't working. Let's try, plan B instead. Because I mean, I wouldn't feel confident doing that. Like no discredit to him as a player. It's just we've consistently for the Wallabies for the past few years, we have these young, inexperienced fly halves. Noel Alessio still isn't at that level yet of James O'Connor having the confidence to change up an attack style. it goes to show having an experienced player like James O'Connor, Quade Cooper, Bernard Foley in around this squad just to have the confidence to be able to give, more options to an attacking fly half to say, look, I know we spoke in prep that this is what we're going to do. We're going to try and chip over the top. We're going to have a kicking game. That's where the space is. Doesn't happen on the day. So you need to come up with plan B. And at the moment, we feel as a Wallabies team like we go in with a plan, doesn't work. We just keep doing it over and over again, just hoping that, well, maybe this time it'll work. Maybe this time it'll work. And then it invariably doesn't.
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting is that you mentioned the kicking game. There was one or two little dinks put in behind England, and it worked. And we just never went back to it. And I think maybe that speaks to the reluctancy to be able to change things on the fly from this very inexperienced backline. You have Tane Edmed, Joseph Akusa Suaalii, Max Jorgensen, Harry Potter. That's 4 out of your 7 backs that have played, I think, less than 15 tests, some of them less than 10. Like, you add Ikitau in there, and then all of a sudden you've got a more experienced player. You add Tom Wright at fullback and
Hmm.
shift Kellaway to wing, you have got a
Yep.
vastly more experience. You add James O'Connor to number 10, you know what I mean? It's just, it's, it's, it is, we have the tools to do it. We just didn't
Yep.
have them. And England played a lot better than we did. I think man for man in the back line, I don't think they played better. But obviously, as a unit, which is all that matters in this team game, they played a lot better. So
Yep.
really, really frustrating. And I think what's also frustrating is you go through the match stats, they are all so similar. Line breaks, defenders beaten, tackle percentage. We tackled at 85%. That is like our standard. We've won
Mm.
games with that number. We've lost games with that number. England,
Yep.
they tackled at 92%. For a rush defense, that's ridiculously high. And that really speaks to our inability to make the rush ineffective.
Mm.
If a rush defense team tackles above 90 or above, that is a ridiculously great success from Steve Borthwick and his defensive coach and the work of his players. So I'm not going to take anything away from England from a first game after a very long time apart, particularly since they didn't have their Lions players since the Six Nations together as a team because they toured Argentina and played some other teams. So big credit to England. Well done. And I actually think they are the European, like they are the UK and Ireland powerhouse at the moment. I watched Ireland, New Zealand's game. I thought Ireland played well without being amazing, but I honestly think England is going to be the biggest challenge for like the All Blacks and etc. That is I absolutely believe that. But what I want to ask you, Mitch, is what does selection look like for the Wallabies now heading into Italy? We're just speculating. This is purely just a gut feeling and what we see, what we like. Give us a quick rundown of how you see that side being picked for Italy.
Look, there's two ways that the Wallabies could go with this test. And in the past, the Wallabies have always used this Italy test as almost a similar way to the Japan test that we had last week, where you give guys opportunities who are in that wider training squad. I don't think Joe Schmidt will go down that side. The fact that we lost so convincingly to England this week and that we didn't really fire a shot, I think if we want to have any hope of getting back up into the top six, if we want to have any hope of sort of building into the last two tests against Ireland and France, then we need to pick our best team available. So I'd expect to see Ikitau come back in. I'd expect to see, Tom Hooper somewhere, whether it's on the bench or straight into straight into the starting team. I'm not too sure there. Um, so get those guys from Exeter and James O'Connor, I think, needs to be included somewhere as well. Uh, I I'm not really 100% sure yet which way they'll go. What do you think, John? Do you think this is an opportunity for them to test combinations? Like I guess the options they have is that we could see a completely shuffled back row. So we could give Harry Wilson a rest, shift Valentini to 8, start Tizzano, and maybe start Champion de Crepney at 6. That's an option that the Wallabies very well could go with.
Yeah, I think what you have to consider is freshness and fitness. So
Mm.
that's how I'm going to go into this picture. And so who's fresh, like who's lacking freshness? I think Nick Frost has played like a ridiculous amount of minutes. And this has been cited. Like his minutes are cooked. Like they're
Yep.
just ridiculous. So he had a rest against Japan. I probably would give him a rest this week as well. Like we don't need him for this test because we do have options, and those options being because Tom Hooper's coming back. So what you could do in the second row is play Darcy Swain in there with Jeremy Williams. That's a ready-made. That's the best second row
Yep.
combination from Super Rugby. Obviously, Swain hasn't been a huge part of. He hasn't been a part at all of the Schmidt test side, but he has been in camp previously. So he's
Yep.
not coming in brand new. And now he's been in for. He would have been in for 2 whole weeks now, because he would have been with the Wallabies in Japan likely after he played such a big part in that Australia A game. So that's an option. But you could also go Jeremy Williams and Tom Hooper in the second row with Jeremy Williams on the bench. If you
Mhm.
want to rest Luke Hunt for his rib cartilage injury, which is just a time issue, he's just getting cortisol injections to get through the pain of playing. So it's how you manage that. In the front row, I would start Aiden Ross and play Angus Bell on the bench. It's not Angus Bell. It's not like he's been playing the biggest minutes that he has in previously because he's been on the bench for every game. And I like not having Tupou and Bell on together. They were great for the first half of the England game, but
Yep.
I just think that with the way that we're teething our front bench, and particularly because Alan Alatoa is still trying to get up to speed,
Mm.
you just need that pain. You need a dynamic ball runner like Bell on with Alan Alatoa, who's a grafter, very much like Aiden Ross. So
Yeah.
that's where I'm
Well, you
seeing
very
that.
much lose that impact off the bench then if you're starting both of those guys, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. And so it might come down to scrummaging well in the second half, which Aiden Ross and Alan Alatoa, I believe, can do very well against Italy. But it's just how you see the optics there, and that's just how I'm expressing that. I think in the back row, it's not like Rob Valentini. Rob Valentini's still trying to get up to speed after having such an injury laden
Yep.
season. And if he's not got an injury that's kind of hampering him, so that if he's full fitness, it's just form thing. I reckon you leave him there, and
Hmm.
you probably give Carlo Gisano, who's of Italian heritage, if he's feeling good, you probably give him that start. Honestly, you
Yep.
can probably afford to rest Fraser, and then you put Harry Wilson there at 8 because I think he's the captain, and he had a rest against Japan, and he's a big motor player. So I think he's okay. He doesn't seem like he's lacking the energy to be able to go and go again. And you might
Mm.
put someone like Nick Champion-Krebney or a Pete Samu on the bench there that gives you genuine 7 cover, and you may get that
Mm.
opportunity to see that. And then
Yep.
so if you have Tom Hoop, if you
Forget
go to
that
six,
Samu's included.
yeah, because then you can put Tom Hooper on the bench with Pete Samu. That's a Brumbies connection right there. And then whoever you
Yep.
leave on the field will have that ready-made connection. And then you've got Ryan Lonergan, who Pete Samu's played with. It's just gonna make more sense. And I don't think this is the moment for Kalani. Honestly, I don't think
Mhm.
I don't think we need to introduce that level of
Yep.
depth building into our practice right now,
Yep.
particularly with how important the world ranking teams points are. And then in the back line, I agree with you, but I this won't happen, but I want to see Hunter Paisami and Lenny Kitau in the center combination. I want to see how that goes. And this is particularly because Juan Ignacio Brex and Tommaso Minicello, who are the Italian pairing, are deadly centers. Like they are great combination. And I would love to see Suoli'i get an opportunity on the Sting. Like just put him there, put Jorgo on the other one, and just have Kellaway at fullback. Just want to see how this works with, of course, a James O'Connor 10, but I don't think that'll happen. Ikitau and Hooper
Mm.
have traveled with the side. That's been made official. I don't think O'Connor's going to be there. Do I want to see Carter Gordon brought in straight away? No. I it that worries me, and it worries me because he hasn't played a whole lot of rugby. Give him 20 minutes off the bench, sure, but it just feels like such a big move to go from, particularly because it's like we haven't been firing, and it'll be exciting if he plays the last 30 and kills it in Italy. Then that's great, but starting him is a big responsibility, particularly because he's
Mm.
going to have to take control of a lot of the kicking because no one else in the back line kicks for line or kicks for goal if you don't have Lonergan on there.
Yep. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what they do there. I there's so many different ways that Joe Schmidt could take this. I know that Wallabies teams in the past have underestimated Italy, and I mean, you really have to get back to Dave Rennie losing that test with Ben Donaldson, missing that kick at the end. Ultimately, saw him getting fired. So I don't think we'll take this team too lightly. I would love to see that suggestion that you made with Ikitau coming in with Hunter Paisami, but I just don't think that they move Suoli'i onto the wing because at the moment he's a centre.
Yeah, no,
Mm.
like I said, I'd like to see it happen. I don't think it will happen. I was very impressed with the Wallabies scrum in first half. I thought that Tupou and Bell had that dominance as alongside Pollard in the front row over the English. And I expected that from the outset, but it was nice to see that they probably weren't rewarded as much, but I felt like that their scrum was definitely under pressure. So it'll be really interesting to see how it goes. Mitch, do you have any final comments on the game in England or Italy or what you're expecting from this week?
I guess the only comment, and I'll probably talk a little bit more about this on the Scrumbags podcast, so make sure you jump in and listen to that this week, the little sneaky
Absolutely.
plug. But there's a lot of, I think, blame for the Wallabies performance this week needs to sit with RA and the administrators. And we talk about, this Reg 9 window, Wallabies players not eligible. If we know this for years, this isn't the first time we've heard this. Like this narrative comes up in the media every single time we play this extra test. We know Rugby Australia's cash strapped, so they want to play tests outside the window, as many tests as possible. The All Blacks always play 3 tests. South Africa usually plays 3. We always play 4 or 5. We're always the one nation that wants to play as many as possible. In future, it's evident that we need our best players to go up against the likes of England, France, Ireland, Wales, Scotland. So we shouldn't be playing a test against England at Twickenham outside the Reg 9 window because it's proven that we're hamstringing ourselves from the outset, and it makes it hard for the Wallabies coaches that all of a sudden they've got to sling together this team that isn't the best option, that doesn't have the cohesion, doesn't have the depth that we've come to expect, and we get smashed. And so then all of a sudden these questions start to get asked, and it comes down to poor management. If we're going to play these games, let's play Wales, let's play Italy, because we could scrape through with the team that we had this week. We can't match up against an England or an Ireland at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's an important thing because when you house it in that, it's optics versus cash, and so what are the optics actually surrounding the game, and how do we make that look appealing? But then also, what is the cash incentive? And optically, it'd probably be better if the Wallabies didn't play and we won the
Hmm.
following week against someone in the Reg 9 window, as opposed to the cash inflow. From a journo's perspective and a punter's perspective, probably feels better that way. We'd have to get down to the economics of it all to be able to weigh that up.
That's a whole nother
But
like podcast series. We could
oh
speak
yeah,
for days on this.
as Sean Maloney says, chat for another day. But
That's
I
right.
think it's a really good salient point, and I think we'll hear more on this. And as Mitch said, you'll hear more about it on the Scrumbags podcast. So make sure you head over to them on all the pod platforms where you get your favorite pods. Make sure you subscribe to Scrumbags as well. Mitch, thank you so much for coming on and chatting Wallabies defeat to England, and congratulations to England. Really, really good game from them. Good players. Uh, are just so many good players that they have. Their depth is crazy. Like that wasn't the
Mm.
team that I would have picked, and I said that in the preview, and they still managed to just absolutely play out of their skin. So really, really good stuff. Thank you, Mitch, for coming on for a chat today.
Thanks, John. Happy to chat rugby. See ya.
And for all of you guys, make sure you keep your eye out for episodes in the days coming, because we will be previewing the Wallabies in Italy. We will be looking at things like the All Blacks in Ireland, and we'll also be looking at how the Quilted Nations series is shaping up. So until then, enjoy your rugby, keep your eye out for rugby content, and always like and subscribe here. Thank you very much. Ciao for now.